Hello, everyone, and welcome to a discussion of our hopes and predictions for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is releasing exclusively on Nintendo Switch in just a few hours on July 29th.
Yeah.
My name is Michael Richardson, and join with me today is fellow Xenoblade enthusiast Stephen Tomaino. Stephen, I'm glad to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm super excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. I cannot wait to dig
I
in.
know.
But I want to start off by saying that this conversation will include spoilers for Xenoblade Chronicles, not for Xenogears Xenosaga, for Xenoblade Chronicles. If you haven't played the games, just go play them. Trust my judgment on this. But yeah, there will be spoilers for both 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah.
But as we will be delving into what we want to see from the game, as well as both story and gameplay elements that have already been teased. So, this is your spoiler warning. Now, with that out of the way, I thought we would start off by just going into a bit of our histories with the Xeno franchise. Steven, what has been your history with the franchise and the series thus far?
Okay, so the first Xeno game that I ever saw and heard about was Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii. It was back in, I want to say it was around like 2013, 2014 on YouTube. I saw videos about it, gameplay. There was a YouTuber who was doing a Let's Play of it, Chugga Conroy, very famous YouTuber. He was really the first person that I saw like playing the game. And pretty much like from the first video that I saw of him playing it, I just was like, this game is special. Like, I need to go out, get this game at GameStop, play this game immediately. It just looks so fun. So I did that, and I played the game along with the Let's Play, and I had an absolute blast. Like, it was one of my favorite experiences on the Wii, one of my favorite games ever at the time that I played, and it still is to this day one of my favorite games ever. If not my favorite, honestly. And yeah, then after that, Xenoblade Chronicles X came out. I played that. I had time of my life with that game, even though, you know, it was definitely a lot different than the first Xenoblade Chronicles, but I still enjoyed it just as much. And then after that, Xenoblade 2 came out with the Switch and everything, and we got to playing on that, and that game was just like, blew my mind. I mean, that was so fun. A great way to end the first year of the Switch and all that, you know. And so then after that, really, I kind of got interested with the other Xeno games because, you know, I'd heard that they existed but didn't really know much about them. So I kind of went back, got Xenogears on the PS1 and played that over 2020 over quarantine. And that game, the story just blew my mind. Like, I couldn't even believe the story was so crazy. And then from there, I played the whole Xenosaga trilogy on the PS2. And those were all very fun games. Xenogears was awesome. As I said, Xenosaga, the same thing. Just awesome games, crazy stories. And it was interesting to see the development, you know, from those early Xeno games to Xenoblade Chronicles. And yeah, so that's pretty much my history, though, with the whole Xeno series and everything.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to see how much Takahashi's work has changed over the past decades. But I started, like you, pretty early on. My first game was Xenoblade Chronicles X, but I want to go back a few years because for whatever reason, I really got into games in the early 2010s and 2012. And I keenly remember the day Xenoblade Chronicles launched. I was in a mall right where I lived. And at the local GameStop, I remember asking one of the very kind gentleman who was at the cashier. I'm like, hey, this game launched today. Do you guys have it? It's like, oh my goodness, I haven't put it in stock yet. Yes, we do have it. And, you know, when I look back on my life, I tried to have regrets, but one of my regrets was not buying the game that day.
Uh,
I never did. It took until the new 3DS release for me to originally play Xenoblade Chronicles. But even then, I only played it for an hour because I decided I could not deal with the 3DS for a game that ginormous. But with Xenoblade X, that's what really got me into the series. I just remember being so hyped for it. I loved the premise, and I really grew to love the characters, but above all, the gameplay. Just exploring Mira and understanding what was going on, and just seeing all the different areas, Noctilum, Sylvalum. They still, I still sometimes dream about those areas, right? They're just so well realized. And following that, the surprise announcement of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I still can't believe it, made it in the launch year of the Switch, just capping off one of the best years in gaming, I think, in history. And that game just completely, in certain ways, just tore me apart, just emotionally. Just such a well-written story. And even though some people might think it gets off to a rocky start, it's one of those games that, almost like recently playing Persona 5, that I appreciate more in retrospect. And just the retrospect just grows more and more as time goes on. I love that game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And a lot of that, too, is because of the gameplay. But story obviously plays a big factor. Following that, I played Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, which was similarly terrific. I loved exploring the world of Bionis and Mechonis. I still think that game probably has a better story than Xenoblade 2. But needless to say, they're all terrific stories. And now having 3 right on the horizon, there's a lot to look forward to. But now going into Xenoblade 3 in particular, we've learned actually quite a bit about this game up to this point. But at the same time, there's a lot we don't know. So the purpose of this conversation really is to go into what our hopes and predictions are for the game. So Stephen, I want to ask you, what is not necessarily your number one hope, but one hope you have for Xenoblade Chronicles 3?
Okay, so one hope that I have, this might sound kind of not the biggest, as you said. It might be a little silly, but in the reveal trailer, there was that small snippet where they're in an ocean and there's a ship, a boat of some kind, and looks like that's being controlled, like the players are presumably controlling the ship and the characters are riding on that. And so seeing that kind of got me excited and reminded me of Xenoblade Chronicles X, and what I'm kind of hoping for is that there's some kind of inclusion of rideable like vehicles similar to, I don't think they would be exactly the same as like Skells, for example, but maybe just some kind of like vehicle to traverse the different landscapes, like you can fly around or something, or drive around on some kind of like motorcycle type car vehicle thing. There's a boat, as we saw in the trailer. I think that would be really fun, just to add another like dimension.
Give yourself
of exploration.
a master cycle.
Exactly, yeah. It would just like add another like depth to the exploration of the whole world, you know what I mean? And it would be fun to just like drive around at nighttime or something, see the sky, things like that, or just access areas that you can't normally on foot, things like that. They could hide some secret areas and different places on the map if you had a way to like fly over to it or something using a vehicle, or you had to sail over to it on a ship, something like that. So I think that would be kind of an interesting like dimension they could add to exploration of the world in Xenoblade 3 if they added that.
Well, I would love to see Skells. I'm confident it's not going to happen. I mean, later I want to touch on what I want to see from the world, and specifically interconnectivity. But I think if the world is as interconnected as Xenoblade Chronicles, or even Xenoblade Chronicles X, I think something like a vehicle, like that boat we see, maybe it goes across the entire world.
Yeah.
We don't know that yet.
Yeah,
but I similarly would love to see something like that, but I think it all goes back to the scale. And frankly, we don't know a whole lot about the interconnectivity of Aionios. I believe they've hinted that it's similar to Bionis and Mechonis, in that, it's not separate titans that you have to travel
Yeah.
to via a loading screen.
Yep.
But I would love to see, a vehicle, like you say, um, hell, maybe even a plane, or there are so
Yeah.
many, at
Exactly.
the end of every Dragon Quest, it feels like there's an airship or a Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Something
Exactly.
like that would be super fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. That'd be very cool to see. But
Yeah.
and that segues almost perfectly into my hope in that I'm gonna kind of combine these hopes actually. I'm gonna cheat a bit here. It's our discussion.
Uh-oh.
We can cheat.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
I want there's two things. I want to see that interconnectivity similarly to Xenoblade Chronicles, but I also want the areas to be dense. Now, this is something that Xenoblade Chronicles X in particular sort of struggled with. That game was massive, but not everything in there was necessarily worthwhile. There were quite a few times you were just running along, you wouldn't exactly see too much. If you're in Primordia, you'd be seeing a lot of grassy plains. Now, what I want to see is smaller areas focused really heavily on story and where everything has meaning, where a side quest leads to a certain hidden area, or this seemingly remote crater that you didn't think about really has a purpose. And I'd like to see that too, because even though the game is bound to be massive, it's a Xeno game, Xenoblade game in particular, I want to see it really hone in on every single area and use them to its full extent. Now, with that being said, if they can combine the scale with something like a vehicle, as you said, and really make everything feel purposeful, I think that'll make it, really make it a good contender for the best in the franchise.
Oh yeah.
But with that being said, there's a lot already in the world to look forward to. Obviously, right now I'm in the Meadows area, Malik Meadows. That's where I'm recording from. But
Nice.
I would also love to see, I'd love to see as we venture through the game, venture through the world of Aionios, the ability to see places we previously went to. Of course, there's always the talk about how you can see Colony 9 from various places on Bionis.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see a similar level of detail really placed into the world that really makes it feel like there was a lot of thought put into it and where you are. So yeah, that is one of my hopes, if not my biggest hope for the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. I agree with that too. Like it would be cool if, I mean, we don't know exactly what the layout of Aionios is, like you said, right now, but it would be cool if, you could travel across the world and from wherever you are, you'll be able to see different locations you visited previously, or maybe even get a glimpse of like where you're going, or future locations that you might not know you're going to, but you'll eventually end up there, So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And I do think the game is going to be more like that than the Titans. It really does seem
Yeah.
like there's one singular area. I mean, the box art shows a giant plane with, of course, the dead Urian Titan and the Mechonis
Yeah.
sword.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I think that's going to play a pivotal role in the game.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, I'd be very, very shocked. But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's the key image, right?
Yeah.
But I
Exactly.
think
And
yeah.
yeah. And speaking of that, actually, hey, you mentioned the Orion Titan and Mechonis sword. That kind of plays into something else that I was thinking about. Was that maybe that there's going to be like sort of elements from areas in the past two games, like, not necessarily just a full on, return of like, I don't know, Gar planes or something,
Yep.
but like I'm thinking that maybe the world, like different areas within the world will sort of be like a melding of like two or more areas from like previous like games and stuff like that. So maybe like there'll be an area that's like kind of has like grassy plains like from Gormott and Gar plains or something, but then it'll be mixed with like a desert area like more Ardain or something like that. It'll be kind of like, so you'll kind of see like mixtures of those like like past areas and stuff from the different Titans or the Bionis, Mechonis. So I think that would be kind of interesting if that was sort of like how the world was laid out as well, like if that's how the areas were put together in 3.
Is there a specific area you think you'd want to see? I mean, I know how much you love the Bionis interior,
Yeah,
but is there
Bionis interior. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I would definitely love to see the return of like Eretz Sea, some sort of element from that, because like, going around Eretz Sea at nighttime is like just magical. You know, I would definitely say also the Orion Titan, the interior, is just like when you're going through that, and it's kind of like a swampy sort of area, but there's, the beautiful lights and bioluminescence going on, and it just looks amazing. Maybe even some of the more like mechanical elements of like the central factory or something too would be kind of cool to see, like huge like pistons and machinery or something like that that's like integrated into the like natural landscape or something like that would look kind of cool, the melding of those two elements,
Yeah, those are all great ideas, and specifically for areas I didn't think about. But I guess this kind of segues into my next hope, which is while I do want to see at least a little bit of attention paid to the former games, I think it's bound to happen. I also want to see 3 really carve out its unique identity. And I think that extends to its areas. I want to see areas that we've never seen before in the Xenoblade game, and areas that, frankly, we could have never imagined. Now, in remixes, I don't think would necessarily do that. We've already seen the Fallen Arm is in the game, and there have been implications that Eretz Sea will make a return, which is great, but I also want to see a lot of new areas. So that's personally one hope, because I don't want them necessarily retread old ground, even if those areas are so cool, and even seeing them again in a remix fashion, I'm sure they do a good job with it. But I do want to see, more original areas, perhaps with even unique soundtracks as well.
Oh yeah, soundtrack is
Yep.
definitely a big thing in this game. I mean, that's definitely one of my biggest hopes as well, is that, and I'm fairly certain that we'll get an amazing soundtrack, because they haven't disappointed so far with the soundtracks of any of the games. But yeah, definitely one of the biggest things that I'm like looking forward to for Xenoblade 3 is the soundtrack, and hearing all of the new songs that are going to be composed and played throughout the game. I purposely haven't listened to any of like the music so far that's been posted online anywhere, because I really want to go in blind and just experience the music like as I play through the game and the scenes that they're put in. And yeah, I just think that the music though is definitely going to be a huge point of like just amazement for the game, and it's going to be so awesome to hear all the new songs and everything, and also to hear the integration of the flute, which we know is sort of a recurring object, it seems, based off of the different trailers we've gotten and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that's fit into the music, if there's going to be some kind of recurring motif in the melody that's a flute of some kind. That would be kind of cool, or we'll just have to see.
Yeah, no, I think the flute is going to play a major role. I mean, what surprised me this morning waking up, we're recording this on the 27th. What shocked me waking up was I knew the flute was going to play a massive role in the game. It was already seen in so many of the soundtracks they posted to Twitter. But what utterly shocked me was that they actually made the flutes for Noah and Mio as offseers.
Yeah.
Like actually using like liqueur and all that to make a distinct sound. And I think sort of that integration of the real world with the game, I think it's going to make for something special.
Yeah.
And I think if they went that extra mile to make their own instruments for this game, I think the soundtrack, that's dedication, right? And I think that it really just goes to show, for me, for this point, to this point, everything about the game has just clicked. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go in, as objective as possible. But right now, my excitement's through the roof, because it seems like they've done just everything I could have wanted. And this is something I couldn't have even dreamed about, was a soundtrack where they really hone in on this one instrument. And I'm excited to see how the flute sounds, because frankly, I don't know how it's going to sound in a battle theme or even something really serious. But I think it's
Yeah.
gonna make for something really special because yeah, I agree with you. I think the soundtracks are one of the best parts of these games. They're the parts that really drive me forward. Always look forward to hearing what the final boss theme has in
Oh
store because
yeah.
it's always incredible, whether it be Zanza or Artifice Ion
Yeah.
or even the Fog Beast. You know that they're
Yeah.
always terrific. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
Yashinori
Sure.
Mitsuda, Ace, Kenji Hiramatsu, all the various composers for this game have something really special in store. And I think these are gonna be soundtracks we talk about for years to come because the Xenoblade franchise are my personal favorite video game soundtracks.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's certainly I guess that's kind of a hope is that the soundtrack lives up to expectation.
Yeah.
But you know, with this dream team really behind it, I'm very confident will. Judging by what we've heard so far, you know, even that first initial melody where Noah and Mio are just looking at the Uriah Titan and the Makana sword right in the
Yeah.
reveal trailer, hearing that, you
Yeah.
know, it already brings a tear to my eye. I
Yeah,
really can't wait
exactly.
to
That
see.
pulled on the heartstrings for sure.
That did pull on the heartstrings. But I do want to segue a bit out of the world and into the story. Now, Steven, do you have any specific hopes in regards to the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 3?
Um, so the biggest thing for me in regards to the story is that I really want to see how they're going to like tie in Xenoblade 1 and 2 because it's already been stated and said and shown in the trailers that um Xenoblade 3 will kind of be like the third part of the trilogy of Xenoblade games, and it'll kind of tie in Xenoblade 1 and 2 together. So I'm wondering like how is it going to do that? Like are we going to get some sort of glimpse into what happened after after Klaus was killed and Zanza was killed and the conduit disappeared and all that? Are we gonna see like just the lives of like are we gonna see returning characters? You know what I mean? Things like that. I'm interested to see what the tie-in is gonna be between all three games and maybe how that's gonna connect with the world of Aionios and the different and the new cast of characters as well and what role they're gonna play with that all.
Well, I'm very interested to see in particular how Future Connected plays a role in this game because you know the title Future Connected when it was initially revealed it left a lot of questions. What exactly does it mean?
Yeah.
Having beat it, you know, there's still a lot of questions, but I'm fairly confident that we're gonna see something similar to the Fog King in this game, or some sort of dimensional, you know, object that's really here. And I think that's gonna go into where this exactly is placed in the timeline.
Yeah.
Now, frankly, 1 and 2 take place by and large at the same time. I think that by being the future of both the worlds of 1 and 2, I think Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to take place in the future, you know, after those events. But how long? And how exactly do these characters get here? We've already seen Melia and Nier in the game. We've seen that one character looks suspiciously like Shulk that's playing a flute in the reveal trailer with the long blonde hair.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see what role they play and how exactly they're here. Because who knows, maybe they are the same characters who were transported because of those rifts, or maybe it's something completely different. But I would agree, I think the mystery behind how this exactly relates to the worlds of 1 and 2 is one of the biggest questions of this game. And it's something that I hope gets resolved to a very satisfying degree. And it's something that can really make for something, you know, really, really fascinating if they pull it off right.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I also was gonna say you brought up Future Connected, and I do think like one of my potential thoughts on maybe an explanation of what's going on in the world of Aionios, like why we see, you know, Araya and why we see Mechonis, things like that. Yeah, I think that the dimensional rifts, like from Future Connected, that were shown off, I think those are probably going to play like a big role in explaining maybe a lot of like where these things come from past games and things like that. And it'll be interesting though to see like if that is going to be the case or not, or what's going to be revealed in the game when we actually play it. So
now you previously alluded to Klaus, and Klaus became both the architect and Zanza.
yes,
You know, killing the people he helped create. Do you think? I mean, we've already talked about Shulk, but or at least I think he's going to come in the game. Do you think Klaus or Zanza or some other form of that entity will play a significant role in this game, or will even be there to begin with?
You know what? I can't like. I think it won't be specifically like Zanza or Klaus, but I do think that there will be some kind of entity like similar to Klaus that's sort of like pulling the strings, sort of like an architect type character that's maybe pulling the strings behind the scenes. And I think that character maybe is like the one that sort of created Aionios or something, or brought the two worlds together, or maybe it's going to have something to do with like the conduit or something. And I think that this like character maybe it's not necessarily going to be, you know, a returning character from the past games, but I think that this character though is most likely like gonna exist just because that sort of like overarching like god type character was in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, and it's a big thing in the Xeno games in general. Same thing in Xenogears, Xenosaga, you know, there's a lot of like god type characters like that. So
well, we've already seen, you know, how big figures play a role in this game. You know, the main people of the respective nations, Kiev and Agnes, Melia, and Nia, they're worshipped almost as deities. These characters only have 10 years to live, which, by the way, I just love as a story premise.
Yeah.
I think it really sets up so much, and it's really fascinating. But I do think that Klaus or Xander, some form, some allusion to that is going to be in this game. But I'm also gonna, this might be jumping forward a little bit, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna go into who I think is the true enemy of this game.
Ooh.
And we've already seen allusions to this sort of secret organization.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna lie to you. There's just a part, this series likes to subvert expectations a lot. And there's gonna be a plot twist at the last minute that messes this all up. But I don't think it's a single person or thing that's really pulling the strings here, as we've seen throughout the game's marketing. Rather, I think it's sort of an ideology, or a way people think, that's really making the world the way it is. Now, we still need to know why these characters live for so little. But frankly, I think it goes beyond who one singular person is. If I had to make a guess right now, and it's not going to be true, but I'd probably say it might have just to do with human nature in general, or, you know, just a fear of the future that could be the true enemy here. Now, whether that is an amalgamation or a manifestation of someone or something, we don't know. But that's my personal prediction. I don't think there is necessarily a true enemy, as we like to often think as a singular person, but rather that's who I think is pulling the strings here. But we'll just have to wait and see. Do you have any idea who that true enemy could be, Stephen?
Yeah, I was actually gonna say something similar about that organization that we've seen, like in some of the trailers. They have, the thing that I noticed with them is that they have that infinity sign like within their eye, and I'm thinking like maybe that has something to do again with like the concept of time and how that's gonna be like interwoven into the game, like how the characters only live for 10 years, they call them terms. They make reference to those like big clocks of some kind,
the
maybe
flame clocks.
Maybe the clocks are gonna have something to do with this organization. I'm thinking that like all of these things are gonna be connected in this like this organization of some kind is going to be like the one that's kind of doing a lot of this, like maybe almost sort of like almost kind of like an Illuminati type like organization, like they're in the shadows of, you know, the world, kind of like pulling the strings, doing the secret these secret things or something. And maybe that's like why the people live for so little. Maybe there's some kind of cause like that they're you know, they started this organization for, to control the people or something. Like, we'll have to see though. And if maybe they have like a higher up that sort of they report to, almost similar to that like architect type role that we were mentioning earlier.
No, those are all good points. Now, look, I want to say first and foremost, if this organization, they're going to play a role in the game, and if they're executed as well as Torna was, in my belief, in Xenoblade 2, and the Torna organization wasn't in Torna the Golden Country, but as well as those characters were developed, then I'm on board, right? Yeah. I thought those characters were Jin, Laura, Malos, Hayes, even Mikhail to an extent. All those characters were just so well done. This series really does a terrific job of making you feel for the villains and really giving them characters, really making them fully fleshed out characters. And that's something I want to see. And I do think they'll play a role in the game, but to what extent they play, we'll just have to wait and see. But I also want to go into my next hope with the game. And this might be slightly remedied by what's recently been said in interviews, but I really want this game to give each of the 6 main characters the time to shine. And I really want them to play a role in the story to the extent that they're unforgettable by the end. Sometimes, even in Xenoblade 2, by the end, to an extent, you forgot about certain characters. Like Tora just completely goes to the side in favor of Poppy. Yeah. Morag doesn't have nearly as much screen time towards the end as someone might like. But with 3, I really want them to focus in on what the story of, whether it be Taion, Xeno, or Lance, Noah, Mio, or Senna. I really want them to go I really want them to go into all those characters, their backgrounds, how they connect with one another. I think that can really make for something fascinating, because while we've seen, 4 character parties in previous games, we haven't seen 6 right at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And they've already said they tried to give each character equal screen time, but whether that amounts to anything, it probably will. I'm confident in the writers for this franchise, but I want them to really hone into who these characters are. And because of that, we've seen the 7th hero slot that's also in the game. I want them to similarly be a focus, but I don't want there to be so many characters that they're underdeveloped or that they become forgettable, because we already saw, that there were quite a few of those 7th hero slots.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to become so much so that it becomes overwhelming and you don't want to learn more about what these characters' backgrounds are, what they've been up to, or what their future looks like. So those are kind of 2 hopes combined into one. I want to see these characters really fully fleshed out, and I also don't want the 7th hero characters to be forgotten.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be like a tricky line for them to kind of try and balance like all of the characters. And it would be awesome if, at least in my mind, what I'm thinking, it would be awesome if like they kind of make the characters almost function in a similar way to like the characters in Torna the Golden Country, where you kind of really felt like they were a close knit sort of like band of warriors traveling across the land, and like you really got to know them, and they would stop at campsites and rest, things like that, and just chat with each other. I think it would be cool if they did something like that with the characters, and because we do know that all of them are soldiers of some kind, and it would be cool if it was similar to Torna in that way. And speaking of the hero slot too, I think that what I'm thinking would be like the best approach for that is like almost similar to like Blade quests, where like each of the characters maybe will kind of like, they won't be like a main like character per se or anything. Like they won't really get a focus like that big like in the story or anything like that. But maybe they'll each have like their own sort of like quest lines that you can kind of go through, and by doing those quest lines, like their character will get developed. You'll get to learn more about each one of them. Like if you decide to do like sort of optional like quest lines maybe or something like that. That's my idea maybe for the seventh hero.
Yeah, those are all good ideas. I do want to say, maybe I see this is already rectifying or alleviating my fears to an extent. The campsite is actually returning. I think it's
awesome.
slightly different from Torna, but yeah, that can make a really good interaction between characters. Of course, I think the famous campsite scene is from this little known game called Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
But, if they can sort of go back into what they did with Torna, because those were very well executed as well, I would agree with you. Maybe we can have better than Mitra's cooking, but anyhow,
exactly.
Cooking may be returning as well. I can't exactly remember.
Yeah.
But with the 7th party slot, say what... I'm not the biggest fan of how the blade system works in Xenoblade 2. I'm not sure a lot of people were. But I did really enjoy getting to know those characters, and seeing something similar to the Blade quests, I think would be a great way to go about these hero stories, because those were similarly well written. I do still want to see them interwoven perhaps into the main plot. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if they were able to find a way, that'd be terrific. But the Blade quest would be a way to do it, because those were really, really well developed. Now, in terms of the story, is there anything else you really want to go into, Stephen? Because I have one more hope, but I want to give you a...
Let's hear your hope, actually. I don't really have anything in particular that I'm really hoping for. I mean, really just that I just really want to be like blown away with some huge twist at the end is really like, the biggest thing. I just want to kind of have like that moment that happens in every Xenoblade game where you're just like, oh my god, like I can't believe what's going on right now,
the 20-minute cutscene.
Exactly.
But I one hope is that I do want to know, I do want there to be something a bit mysterious about the sword. We haven't exactly heard a lot about what Noah's sword is. Obviously it sticks out. It's red. It looks like a Monado. They have it right next to the Monado Replica EX and the Aegis in the expansion pass. But I want to learn what that is, what role it plays in the story. But at the same time, I don't want the story to be about the sword. I want it to be about the people. And I think Xenoblade Chronicles has done a very good job of not making it about the singular weapon, but rather the wielder or the party in general. But I do want to see whether the sword plays a role in this conflict, perhaps. And can't see the future, but I'm very curious to see what role Noah's sword has. I don't even know if we have a name for it yet.
I don't think they've named it. And I'm also wondering, how there's different classes for characters? I don't know. I don't remember. Does the sword like transfer over? Because I know that when characters switch classes, like they get a weapon that's assigned to that class, but I don't remember seeing in the trailers like if a character switched to the sword fighter class, did they get that same sword that Noah had, or was it just a similar looking sword?
I can't remember. I think I saw Noah using Mio's weapons, but I don't know if I saw the other way around. But maybe I'm not entirely sure. But if they do wield that sword, then that plays a different ballgame, because then that means someone else can wield it, not just one person. So if that's the case, it would probably play a much lesser role in the story.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Well, I guess transitioning a bit from the story, if we have any other final predictions, we'll go into them at the end. But let's go into the gameplay. Now, if it's not fun, why bother, right? Now, Reggie. But, when it comes to the gameplay has really been one of my favorite parts of this franchise. And 2, it was actually my favorite aspect of the game in general. While the game might not have explained it in the best way, I believe that towards the end, it just became so much fun, in particular with chain attacks. And I guess my biggest hope for this game is that the gameplay is similarly as satisfying. You know, towards the end of Xenoblade 2, you were just switching blades. You really started to know what was going on. At least in my experience, I started to know what was going on whenever it came to blade combos or the different elemental attacks. And when it came to chain attacks in general, you know, those were so fun to pull off
Yeah.
whenever you got the different special tiers and started overkilling an enemy, getting extra XP and bonus currency. It was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And I want to see a similar level of satisfaction and depth in Xenoblade 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, just like you said, I feel like the combat system in the beginning of Xenoblade 2 definitely like it's not explained the best way that it could be, but once you get to the end of the game and you kind of learn everything and you get a feel for it all, it's definitely just like the most satisfying thing in the game. And it's awesome, just how you can just so fluidly like change blades and chain arts and things like that. And it would be awesome if there's something similar to that in Xenoblade 3 as well with the battle system. And it'll be interesting too to see like if there's going to be some kind of integration of like the fusion arts within the whole system of 3 auto attacks and 1 art and different things like that. So, and obviously the whole chain attack has been overhauled, it appears, as well in the trailer. There's no more elemental orbs or anything like that, so we'll have to see how that plays out too.
Now, you mentioned the word integration there, and that's almost been a vocal point of the game's marketing because of the Ouroboros forms.
Yeah.
Now, those I think have a lot of potential for gameplay. Those are arguably the biggest new aspect of the gameplay, and I want to see those. I don't want them necessarily just be an overpowered spam attack button, but something where you really need to strategize. And I'm excited to see how those play a role in the game and whether they open up a similar level of depth or even customization to what we saw in Xenoblade 2 and even 1 to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Ouroboros forms are definitely going to be a very interesting battle feature. And we're going to have to see really how they get integrated into the battles, and if it's going to be one of those things where you kind of have to like recharge it maybe by filling up like a gauge of some kind, by hitting arts, things like that, or building up affinity enough, something like that within battle. So either way though, yeah, the Ouroboros should be very interesting.
Well, you brought up something with one word there that actually brought another hope to me. You mentioned the word affinity, and we've seen the affinity chart in various Xenoblade games, and that's something I want to see return, but it's something I also want to see a bit more fleshed out. Now, we saw all the characters of the world in the previous games, but I want to see how they can take that to the next level. Now, how they do it, I'm not entirely sure. Already, if you ask me, the side quests in 1, and particularly 2 and Torna were so well done. There was such a great connection there. Torna was focused on the side quests.
Yeah.
But I really want to see how they can connect the different races and the population together and whether they use the affinity chart in a certain way. You're going to get rewards as you go on, but maybe the higher affinity you have, the better you perform in battles.
Yeah.
Almost like, I guess this is kind of a stretch, but in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, which is a game they should remaster, by the way, over time you had a bigger audience, and that audience could benefit you over time. And, with all the cheer points and stuff like that, maybe there's a similar concept. As you get more people around your cause, that it helps you in battle. I think that'd be something really fascinating to see in the progression of the system.
Yeah, I agree. That would be very interesting. And kind of also related to the affinity chart, like you said, I think it would be kind of cool too if there was another sort of Colony 6 type, like rebuild a colony type thing where, different people that you'll meet throughout your travels and different towns and colonies, I should say. We know those are returning. Maybe you can sort of find like refugees or something like that, and there'll be almost a similar sort of Colony 6 type area where you can help rebuild this colony, and it's, you know, completely optional. It's not required for the story progression or anything. And I think it would be cool, though, if they kind of brought that back, and then that would unlock different shops, different side quests, things like that, other rewards you could get. The only thing I will say about it is that I do hope that they make it much less, like, grindy than it was in Xenoblade 1, you know, having to go travel around those areas, collecting item orbs till you get the, you know, the rainbow slug or something like that. So it was like, you know, I hope that if they did include it, it would be like, you know, not just grind for rare materials so that you can level up the colony and then you can get all the side quests and things like that.
Now, I remember, Colony 6, I did enjoy it at the end of Xenoblade Definitive Edition. It felt like a great way to sort of let the world go before I went on to Future Connected. Yeah. But yeah, it did feel very, very grindy towards the end, and to an extent, didn't feel worth it. Yeah. I loved seeing the town develop, and I guess that was really the thing that made me want to go through with all that repetition. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it would be cool to have that sort of town. And even, you know, it's not an RPG, but one of my favorite parts of Breath of the Wild was building Terrytown. That was so enjoyable, getting all the wood and the materials. That felt like a natural, to me, it felt like a natural extension of the world. Yeah. So if there was somehow a way they can integrate that into the main story, something you're constantly going about, something that's constantly rewarding, I think that'd be very cool. Yeah. So I would love to see that. But I want to say another hope I have for the game, and I'm not entirely sure if this one's going to come through, but I hope the game, from a technical standpoint, I certainly from a financial standpoint, I hope it performs well, but from a technical standpoint, I hope it performs well. I want there to be a locked frame rate. I want it to consistently be 30 FPS. I don't want those dips. And, you know, seeing the game, there's so much going on screen that it does leave me a bit concerned, but at the same time, Monolith has had years and years to really understand the Switch. So I hope that in docked and in handheld mode, both in terms of resolution and specifically frame rate, that holds up. Because if it's very choppy, then it's not going to be very enjoyable to play. Now with 2 didn't look obviously the best in handheld mode, but it was passable, right? Yeah. So if they can even meet that, hopefully surpass that, but if they can meet that, then I'd be fine with that. But I'd love there to be I don't want to encounter a lot of performance issues with this game.
Oh yeah, for sure, I agree. And yeah, Monolith is definitely going to be pushing the Switch like to its limits with this game, and especially during the battles and stuff is, I think, going to be the really big point of you know, can the Switch handle what they're going to be asking of it. And, you know, with, you know, all the UI stuff, just having like 7 characters on screen, enemies on screen, it'll be interesting to see. But if anyone's up to the task, it's definitely Monolith. And, you know, I do think that they'll put in like their best effort in definitely getting it to run as best as it can on the Switch, you know?
I really hope so. Yeah. Now, that was a bit of a concern, but throughout this discussion, we have been very hopeful, and we've expressed a lot of really adoration for what Takahashi-san and the team at Monolith have created. But I do want to ask, up to this point, do you have any other concerns for the game, whether they be major or minor, for Xenoblade Chronicles 3?
I wouldn't really call this a concern per se, but I'm kind of hoping that the like there isn't really a big focus on equipment and stuff like that in this game. You know, in more modern times, it seems like RPGs and stuff are sort of foregoing, you know, the traditional equipment system where it's like, you know, you go to a town, buy a shield, buy armor, buy headgear, buy leggings, buy a sword, you know, like, and they're kind of opting for more simplified systems where it's maybe, you know, you'll only buy like a sword or something like that every now and then. And I'm kind of hoping that it'll sort of do that in Xenoblade 3, similar to Xenoblade 2, where the characters will have like accessory slots, like maybe only like 1 or 2 or 3 accessory slots or something. And then maybe you'll just equip them with various accessories. And I'm hoping in that way it'll just kind of be simple. So it's like, you just don't really have to worry about it. You can kind of just equip a sword or whatever, or equip some random accessory maybe that'll give you a little boost in battle. And I'm hoping that it'll sort of just be simple in terms of the equipment and the gems and all that, which we know are returning. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there's reason to be concerned there, because I agree. There's nothing, as much as I love RPGs, I don't love going through menus trying to toggle the best equipment, look at it for hours on end. Exactly. I think Xenoblade has done a good job with that, but I don't want a whole lot of emphasis to be placed on equipment. I also don't want it to be super complicated to switch between classes. I think the whole class system is super interesting. I love that it's here, but I don't want it to become overbearing to the point where it becomes frustrating to play. Now, I think one other... this isn't necessarily a specific concern, but it's really broad-reaching. But I am concerned that they might be reaching a bit too far with this game. I think that the story premise is so cool, having only 10 years to live, having these two worlds connected, that have so much lore, that have so much depth. And even in terms of the gameplay, we've seen so many characters on screen, so many beautiful vistas. I just hope that with everything, they can pull it off and make it satisfying. Because I think with a story that's this high-reaching, the story is blatantly a very big emphasis in this game, as it's been in other Xenoblade games. It's not easy to pull off, and there are ways that it can crash and burn. And I hope that it doesn't reach that. I hope that at the end it feels satisfying, that, maybe even I learned something from it. I've learned something, certainly, from all the Xenoblade games to this point. And I hope that it's similar in that regard.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
Now, we have touched on a lot over the course of this discussion, but I do want to ask, do you have any other final hopes or predictions you have for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and exploring the world of Aionios?
I'm really just looking forward to meeting all of the characters and just seeing, like, the biggest thing, as I've said, for me is just, like, I really just want to see, like, how the worlds of Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 will, like, be integrated into this game. And I really want to see, like, what characters might return and what elements from those games might return. And I'm really just hoping that it's just going to be, like, just a non-stop, like, fun fest of, like, oh my gosh, look at this thing from Xenoblade 2 or something, or like, oh, look at that, I remember that from Xenoblade, like, different things like that.
Yeah, no, I echo that completely. I hope that the game doesn't rely on nostalgia, but I certainly hope that we see elements from prior games, because I think it can make for something incredibly interesting. Exactly. Again, I think the premise for 3, combining the worlds of 1 and 2, makes for so much potential and something I didn't even think about before. And, while I have maybe expressed concern, the fact that the image of the Urian Titan and the Mechonis sword was brought up but even before development of 2 began gives me hope that they've really been thinking about this for a long time. And I just cannot wait to venture into this world where I'm going to spend more than likely, more than 100 hours, maybe even 200, who knows. But that is it. We have touched on so much. The only thing that's left is for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 to launch. Let me tell you, Stephen, it has been nothing short of a pleasure speaking with you today. If people are interested, where can they find you?
Really only Twitter. It's at StephenT2902. I don't really do much other social media besides that.
All right, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at TrueMRichardson, and on various other platforms, including SoundCloud, as Michael Richardson 02. 06. Be sure to also check out Michael's blog for any other of my various projects, namely video game reviews, but there's also some other stuff there. Again, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in.
Bye-bye.